Hey there folks, welcome to Spectrum Pulse. We talk about music, movies, art, and culture. And today we're going to be talking about the newest album from Karen Jonas, called Country Songs. But I can imagine, even if you're a fan of independent country, you likely won't recognize this name, especially if you're newer to this channel. And really, that's a damn shame, but it's also somewhat to be expected. I found Karen Jonas effectively by accident in 2014, as her album Oklahoma Lottery was picking up some real buzz among independent country critics and pretty much nowhere else. And I remember being a little bit startled when I covered that album in 2014 as to why, but I'm not all that surprised nowadays, especially given the kind of uncompromising and occasionally bleak material that she wrote. It's a sort of regional, sharp, singer-songwriter driven music that doesn't shy away from telling some hard stories, less concerned with the flash that you normally see around Nashville with big hooks and more with the message and the presence. Sparsely produced, intense without being overbearing, textured and gritty without playing it as a gimmick. There's a reason why Oklahoma Lottery by Karen Jonas is one of my favorite albums of 2014, standing out some really stiff competition with much bigger budgets to land on my year-end list of my top 25. So you can bet in 2016, a year full of standout women in modern country music, Karen Jonas' newest album, Country Songs, is definitely on my radar. Again, I wasn't sure if it was going to be a big breakthrough for her in the mainstream. Her sort of grassroots following can be kind of tough to translate, even if it did look like she was stepping in with a lighter touch for this album, but hell, I wasn't going to miss this. So, in a banner year for country, how did Country Songs turn out? Well, as I expected, it's a great record, but it's also a very different sort of record than Oklahoma Lottery was. Not quite as filled with detail and desperation and softening some of the edges that made that album connect so strongly for me. If anything, I'm reminded a lot of the progression Casey Musgraves took between Same Trailer Different Park and Pageant material, with a fuller sound, more instrumentation, and overall a lighter touch, except that Karen Jonas eschews any stabs at theatricality for rougher tone, subtlety, and the intimacy that places her a lot closer to, say, Heartbreaker of the Year by Whitney Rose coming out last year, or maybe even Angel Olsen's most recent album, My Woman. So why do I like Country Songs more than either of those two records? Two big factors: Karen Jonas herself and the songwriting. We'll get to the writing in a minute, but I don't think she gets enough credit for her delivery, and Country Songs is a prime reason why. In short, while she does not have the range of some of her contemporaries, she more than makes up for it in intensity and subtlety. Most of this record has her singing rather quietly, or in a range that seems far more suitable for intimate bars than stadiums, all the more intensified by the closeness of the vocal pickup and the layering. It's telling how often she doesn't even bother with overdubs or multi-tracking to intensify her vocal emotion. Maybe a little bit of reverb, but that's it. Instead, placing her voice very close to the front of the mix, and relying on her delivery to convey all of that emotion, every tremble and rasp and hesitant moment. And sure, her vocals can get a little bit thin on some of the high notes, but because of how the vocal pickup is situated in the mix, and the fact that she doesn't go flat or sharp, it comes across less frail and more emotive and human. And it helps that she can walk the razor's edge between raw vulnerability and the sort of understated intensity that's all the more thrilling, and I gotta say it, seductive at such close proximity. And here's the thing, where Oklahoma Lottery was very stripped back and bare, Country Songs doesn't shy away from a slightly more expanded band and sound. Karen Jonas has cited her love of the Bakersfield sound in country, and it definitely shows in the instrumentation, with lap steel, a bit of organ, and even fiddle all contributing to a mix of some of the best production outside of, say, Dave Cobb. Now, to be briefly critical of one of my favorite producers in modern country, Dave Cobb can occasionally add some touches to the mix that can feel a little bit too weathered and aged in their fidelity and pickup. Whereas the producer here, Jeff Covert, and the mixer, Bill Wolf, they don't bother with that, trusting that simply by allowing the full range of warm texture through, the approach and the sound will be quite clear. As such, when the fiddle comes through with a real bite on the title track against the liquid steel or the electric guitar, especially on that lower solo, and then when you get a real bass melody supporting it, you're getting a song that is defiantly country, but lacking any of the rounded or softened edges that Nashville often demands. Or take the slow burn of The Garden, with just a hint of reverb on the vocals, the sparse drums, the minor electric chords echoing over the mix against the gentle acoustic groove, and then hints of very low piano to intensify that darker atmosphere, which reaches its darkest point on the distorted, smoky growl of the guitar solo. Just a really killer song. And then when you contrast it with the very delicate acoustics, the cymbals, and the trace of backing organ on Wasting Time just has this real excellent electric guitar melody, or that subtle piano embellishment on the hook of Whiskey and Dandelions, or the very sparse acoustic groove on Why Don't You Stay with the haunted electric elements playing off the fiddle at just the right time, or the deeper groove of the Fair Shake with a great balanced hook, especially in the piano and organ, to the sandy snares, organ, and acoustics of Yankee Doodle Went Home. You've got an album that might seem a tad languid at points, but carries itself with enough poise and intensity to earn that pace. It doesn't feel lumpy or misshapen. Now, that's not saying that there aren't some moments that can feel a tad underwhelming. I kept expecting more of a darker edge to Keep Your Hands to Yourself and Ophelia than actually materialized. They're both a little bit too bright for me. And Wandering Heart plays to a very smooth jazz vibe that Karen Jonas might own vocally, but doesn't really work to match the instrumentation all that well. But overall, this is sort of country sound that I can easily embrace without question. It just is so up my alley. But what about lyrics and themes? Well, as I mentioned earlier, they aren't quite as detailed as the downbeat blatantness that underscored a lot of Oklahoma Lottery, and as such, they can feel a tad more conventional, for lack of better words, compared to songs like Lucky or I Never Learned, or the title track of that 2014 album. Now, that's not saying the detail doesn't show up here at all. The shoutouts to Buck Owens and Dwight Yoakam definitely feel earned on the title track, and I personally kind of like the little Elton John interpolations on Whiskey and Dandelions, but the writing doesn't quite have the same distinct texture and stories that I love so much about Oklahoma Lottery. Now, that's not saying that the emotional intensity isn't here either. Jonas has got a knack for songs like The Garden and Why Don't You Stay to give most modern R&B songs a run for their money and understated sensuality, and her framing is just impeccable as always on tracks like The Wistful Longing of Wasting Time, or the genuine anger of Keep Your Hands to Yourself. But what I've always liked about Karen Jonas's writing is the sense of frank, borderline blunt honesty. She doesn't shy away or sugarcoat the depressing emotional undercurrent to songs like the title track, or the lonely inevitability of the cheating on Wandering Heart, or the blunt admissions of life's unfairness and inevitable endings on The Fair Shake, where she's certain that she's not going to get that fair deal, where that maturity of that acknowledgement does plenty for the dramatic pathos of this album. But the one song that struck me as one of her most ambitious and high concept on this record was the closer, Yankee Doodle Went Home, taking that American country folk hero and showing him displaced, failing in the city where he tries to make his fortune, and yet with no donkey to ride back home to the country, he's stuck trying to bum rides from trucks that just won't stop. It's a song that references the grapes of wrath to underscore its bleakness, and you can easily extrapolate that Karen Jonas is writing about America herself, stuck waiting on an overworked dream to come in without the talent to realize it, or the patience to walk the road and get it for yourself. It's a song that shows Karen Jonas aiming for higher stakes than she ever has in her songwriting, and she clears it without question. I would love to see her do more in this direction. In short, while I don't think I love country songs as much as I did Oklahoma Lottery, it's still one hell of a listen. The clumsiness that crept into that earlier release, that's long gone, refined out, and Karen Jonas showing much more comfort with bigger sounds and ideas while still maintaining that understated emotional intensity that just keeps me coming back for more. It's really attractive. For me, easy 8 out of 10 and definitely a recommendation. Yet another standout in a banner year for country music. Folks, she might not have the major label backing or the tremendous hype behind her, but Karen Jonas definitely deserves to be known beyond the regional scene in Virginia. Check this album out. You definitely will not regret it. It's great. So yeah, thanks a lot for watching. If you'd like to like and subscribe, I'd be more than grateful. Got the poll up here, so for those few of you who actually heard this album, there's your chance to vote, and I really hope you do hear this. It's a great record. Beyond that, anything else I might be able to do to improve my presentation, I'm all ears. I've got that JoJo album coming up next because you guys all wanted me to cover it for some reason, but don't worry, my schedule's piling up, so I will endeavor to get through as much as I possibly can. Till then, I'm Mark, you're watching Spectrum Pulse, and I'll see you next time.